Times are tough now, guys, and it's no joke out here. That's why I'm very proud to be partnering with the Upside app. They're leveling the playing field, guys. They're giving you opportunities to earn cash back on purchases for groceries, purchases for gasoline, purchases for food. These are the things we all spend our money on all the time. I believe in Upside. I use Upside weekly. My lifetime earnings is over $408, and you too can be earning cash back on your fill-ups, your groceries, or your eating out experiences just by signing up, and it's free. By using my invite code JASON75338, that's Jason 753338, you'll earn $5 cash back on your first fill-up. Use the link in the video description or download the app, but make sure you use that invite code JASON753338 and make money by using the Upside app. And this week, our pal Luthez said the world never lets up. It's the hardest part of being a fan, because we also lost yesterday a great man in Terry Funk. And like Jaden said a few moments ago, Terry Funk was 79 years old. And although death is always a tragedy as far as I'm concerned, it's also undefeated. And at some point, everyone goes. We know that Terry Funk was battling dementia, and it's believed he passed away due to complications from his dementia. He survived, obviously, by his two daughters and his brother, Dory Funk Jr. We just lost Jaden. That news was a little bit of an easier pill to swallow, DKM, knowing that he had some struggles with his health already, but losing a former world's heavyweight champion and such an icon of the sport of wrestling, I know a lot of people were kind of celebrating his life today. But let's talk about Terry Funk.
Yeah, I feel bad because so many people that think of Terry Funk today, that know Terry Funk today, either know him from his ECW run and his tag team with Mick Foley there, WWE.
Chainsaw Charlie. We were just talking about that.
Yeah, Chainsaw Charlie, which WWE had to immediately say, okay, it's Terry Funk. You know, Terry Funk been around since late 60s.
1965 is his in-ring debut.
Wow, so mid-60s. And, of course, the younger brother of Dory Funk. And Dory and Terry were themselves. They didn't have gimmicks. They didn't have characters. They were themselves. Dory was the quiet one, the technical wrestler and everything. And Terry was the crazy one. In fact, you can find an old video where Dory Funk Sr. is getting mad at Dory Funk Jr. for losing his cool over something. He goes, I don't need you going off like Terry. I already got one crazy son. I don't need another one or something along those lines. But the point was Terry Funk was always kind of this crazy thing. But Terry Funk wasn't just this crazy wrestler. He was a multi-dimensional wrestler. I mean, if you go look at his time as NWA World Champion, starting from when he won it, you'll notice before he won it, he kind of trimmed up his hair and, went from having the mustache and goatee back to a cleanly shaven face. And the thing about when he won the title was he was a substitute for Dory. He was a substitute for Dory Funk. as Briscoe and Dory Funk had a years and years long rivalry over the NWA title. And so he was a substitute. He came in and he won the ugliest, most beat up belt in the entire world.
That's for sure.
Well, the second one was made during his reign. But yeah, oh my gosh, that was an ugly belt. But he, if you watch him during that time, not that he couldn't go crazy in the ring occasionally. He was one of the ones that kind of started that champion getting disqualified, not so much intentionally, but just because he'd lose it. But you'll go back listen to his interviews and stuff like that. He was a calmer guy. His work in the ring was far more technical. He held the title for just over a year before giving it to Harley Race. And
he almost held it for 2 years.
Well, just he had won it in like December and lost it in like February. So it was just over a year. But yeah, it was like 73 to 75. And and what a lot of people don't realize is that after he and Harley Race had their series of rematches that had already been booked throughout the territories, including a match in Houston, is that Terry was never again a major challenger to the NWA World Championship until his program with Ric Flair.
Yeah.
Because he had so many other things going on outside outside of wrestling.
Well, and the thing about it too, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but because I of course when someone passes away, I tend to do the deep dive so that we could talk about it. But one of the things that really caught me off guard was just how early and often he was wrestling in Japan. And I know him and Dory were two of the first really celebrated gaijins that went to All Japan Pro Wrestling. But he was bouncing around between working for them, working for NWA. His TV appearances, his movies. I mean, he was really all over the place.
Yeah, he was. And he and Dory refused to wrestle each other.
Yeah,
but they did once, and that was in a tournament final that took place in All Japan. Baba was one person to get them to get in the ring against each other, and it was one time.
Was it a final or semifinal?
I heard final. Honestly, I don't know anything about that tournament, so I couldn't tell you. But I know that I just know that in the States they refuse to wrestle each other. Boy, I wish we could get some of that going today. I would like a lot more brothers to refuse to wrestle each other.
Well, CM Punk won't wrestle anyone from the Elite.
Yeah, I'm ready for the Usos to stop wrestling each other. I'm ready for, and the brothers haven't actually wrestled yet. And I'm ready for, I guess they had wrestled as the youngest one, but they're just some others, and it's just like, okay, I'm tired of it. I don't need brothers to be feuding. So,
I actually really enjoy watching brothers beat the crap out of each other.
Well, just because you live in your fantasy there, but
if you have a brother you don't particularly care for.
I love my brother. I just love to punch him in the face way more.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that we don't love our family, but it still doesn't keep us from wanting to slap the spit out of them sometimes.
The interesting thing that I found about Terry Funk while I was doing my research today is his career basically spanned just over 50 years. He started in 1965, wrestled his last public match in 2017. He had wrestled for pretty much all the major companies over the years, specifically Jim Crockett Promotions. He was all over the NWA territories. He wrestled for All Japan. He wrestled for USWA. He wrestled for ECW. He wrestled for Dennis Corluzzo. He really was all over the place. And his death matches in Japan are obviously the way he reinvented himself. But over that 50 years, he wrestled over 2,500 matches. And when he was the world's heavyweight champion in the NWA, he held that title for 424 days, defended it nearly 200 times. He beat Jack Briscoe in Miami Beach on December 10th, 1975. Funk would take the title throughout the U.S., including stops in major NWA territories like St. Louis at the Kiel Auditorium, the Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto, the Sportatorium in Dallas, even the Grand Olympic in Los Angeles. He would have title defenses at the Chase, which I find kind of pretty cool that I'll be going to the Chase this weekend. And really all points in between. His contributions to the NWA were legendary, and he would be inducted into the NWA Hall of Fame in 2009. Although he'd eventually be given matches for the World's Heavyweight Championship, he never would regain that title. And but he was still a draw. And that's kind of the way, being able to reinvent yourself. He was a technical wrestler when he was world's heavyweight champion, and like you said, he had a little bit of an attitude, but he was still a technical wrestler. I even heard today, and I don't know if this is 100% true, but I heard that Bret Hart was not trained by Stu, but rather he was trained by Terry Funk. Jaden, do you know if that's true or not?
I believe it was the Funks, plural, but yes, I believe that is true.
And the thing about it too is, I just recorded, like literally 2 days ago, I was recording a podcast about the 10 pounds of gold and how it wasn't really a known commodity here in Southern California. Although the Grand Olympic Auditorium was the home of the NWA here in California for about 14 years. The title really didn't see a whole lot of face time in Los Angeles. Now, we know Harley Race had a few appearances for the Olympic Auditorium, but really one of the guys who was there quite a bit was Terry, and he had matches with Chavo Guerrero Sr. In fact, he took Chavo Guerrero Sr. to a 60-minute time limit draw, and at the time, Chavo was the big star out here in Los Angeles, so it was, and during that time too, in that same time and space, Terry was wrestling for the America's Championship when he wasn't world's heavyweight champion, which was the main title out here in Los Angeles. And, he did the favor. He put over Chavo Guerrero when he wasn't world champion, which I guess was just the way they used to do business back then.
Hey, I got an example of that. So this is what it is to actually plan things out, plan out stories. The first thing to remember is that when the decision's made to change champions, it's normally months before the title actually changes hands. Almost up to a year sometimes. And this was actually one of the quicker ones. But Terry, just before winning the world title, had been in Crockett's promotion, Mid-Atlantic, where he won a tournament for the United States title. And he held the title like 2 weeks, maybe a month, very short. And he lost it to Paul Jones. And that was all because they knew Terry was going to win the world title. So now, hey, look, what matchup is going to bring you some money? You got Paul Jones, who was a big fan favorite at the time. And he just beat Terry Funk for the U.S. title. Why can't he beat him for the world belt?
Yeah, and that was long-term booking. That was setting up a challenger so you could set up your um, money-making feud. Right before the Tokyo Monster Kahagas won the national championship for the first time, he did wrestle Damian Wayne for the dog championship, and Damian Wayne beat him there. And I guess later Kahagas got a modicum of revenge, and unfortunately in Clayton, New Jersey. But that really did set up Damian Wayne as a top challenger for the national championship at the time, and there was some attempted maneuvering to try to get that happen. Didn't happen until unfortunately much later, but there was something going on. At least it probably wasn't very successful. Obviously, it wasn't very successful, but there was attempted maneuvering to get the national title on D-Dub before, possibly the world title on D-Dub, but that's a different story also.
Now, DK, we know that obviously the former world's heavyweight champion spent quite a bit of time in your home state. I know he was more in the Southwest, but between his territory, or I should say the Funk territory, you also had the Bosch territory in Houston, and then you had the Blanchard territory. What did Terry Funk mean for the NWA? What did the Funk family mean for the NWA, especially in Texas?
Well, oddly, by the time they won their world titles, they were primarily Florida people. But yeah, Dory Sr. ran, I think called it Southwest. I don't remember exactly. Wrestling that ran out of Amarillo and actually Northwest, Jay, Southwest. But that's okay. So, of course, they were big stars there. And, they would talk about the ranch. And a lot of people don't know that ranch is real. That, the Double Cross Ranch was a real place. It was a real working ranch.
Yeah, there was a sick horse there once.
And Terry told Vince, "Sorry, got to go take care of the horse." And so, in fact, Terry, before he went to the home, he had gone back to Double Cross Ranch, and that's where he was living. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because by the time I was around, Amarillo had already basically died. By the end, it was being run by Dick Murdoch and Blackjack Mulligan. When Story Sr. had passed, the brothers kept it up for a while and basically just left it in the hands of friends they trusted. But it's hard to imagine that was once actually the top wrestling promotion area in Texas. It's even funny in that thinking just after Terry Funk won the title, he had an interview with Gordon Soley in the back, and Gordon Soley was telling him that there was a rematch clause and that the rematch was going to take place, like next Thursday or something like that, just real quick. And Terry was like, "Yeah, in Amarillo." It's like, no, not in Amarillo. It's going to be in Jacksonville or some Florida city. He's like, "It's not going to be in Amarillo." No. And you're like, well, I didn't care. One of the interesting things about Terry is that his voice was he didn't have the most intimidating voice, you egg-sucking dog,
Because I'm a man.
Yeah, but he could certainly intimidate you. his insanity being half the reason, but just the way he was. The Funks were legit. They were shooters. They could beat you. They could tie you in knots. They could stretch you, as the old saying goes.
So I was looking on WrestlingTitles.com. That's our friend, the great Hisa site, and I was kind of going through. He has a breakdown of all the title matches. You can go to the NWA. You can pull up the World's Heavyweight Championship, and then he has it broken down, like all the matches. Some of the matches are listed that didn't happen, were canceled or whatever, but it's such a great resource. I highly recommend checking it out, wrestling-titles.com. And I always get the website wrong because I have it bookmarked. I'm going to just double check it right now so I'm right.
While you are looking, do you want to hear a Terry Funk story?
Please,
My Terry Funk story?
It is wrestling-titles.com. Go ahead, please.
At the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance at Pennsylvania Hall at the Philadelphia Civic Center, the smaller hall in the Civic Center, Tri-State Wrestling Alliance had an event, and the match was Terry Funk versus Kevin Sullivan. And they went and ironically fought at the concession stand. And there was a little young Jaden in there deciding to see how close he can get to the excitement because it was right there. Terry Funk was one of his favorites, and he also liked Kevin Sullivan a lot. And they were beating the crap out of each other. And Terry Funk chopped Kevin Sullivan and did it so much force that he hit young Jaden's shoulder and actually separated it.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
And young Jaden, the idiot that he was ecstatic as he could barely hold his arm. His arm felt like it was just kind of hanging there. Thought it was the coolest thing in the world that he had his shoulder broken or shoulder separated by Terry Funk. And he told him such a story many years later at the Radisson Hotel in Cherry Hill at a convention there that was an ECW versus NWA convention or ECW versus WWA convention or something like that. Yeah. It was early ECW and WWA with Dennis Carluzzo. Yeah, but that was an interesting experience having my shoulder separated by Terry Funk.
Because I heard he's such a sweetheart outside of the ring. Did he apologize? Did he try to make it right with you?
No, I told him it was a great thing, and he's like, "Do you want me to separate the other one?"
That sounds like him.
And then Kerry Von Erich was there too, and he's like, "Does that mean I get to punch him in the head now? Would he like that or something like that?" And it just became like a little joke between the guys.
And so you were about to get attacked by the entire Southwest. Interesting. When it comes to Terry Funk, like he was so multi-generational, and to me, he's kind of like what the embodiment of pro wrestling is, because there was an evolution with Terry Funk. It wasn't just, you rest on your laurels as the world's heavyweight champion and ride off into the sunset. And Terry Funk would go on to hold like championship titles for many wrestling promotions, whether it be tag titles with his brother. He would hold the Florida Heavyweight Championship, the Southern Heavyweight Championship, the Los Angeles World Tag Team titles with his brother, the aforementioned America's Championship out here in LA. He never stopped competing at that high level. And, I think there's something pretty unique about that. And even when he got to ECW, he wasn't a young man at that point, and he had been doing death matches in Japan with IWA-Japan. He was also working with FMW. They were doing exploding ring matches. Him and Cactus Jack were kind of competing in those matches in between working for an early ECW, the Eastern Championship Wrestling, later would become Extreme Championship Wrestling. And he will bring over a lot of those hardcore kind of values. And listening to Busted Open today, the first thing Tommy Dreamer said that if there was no Terry Funk, there would be no Tommy Dreamer. And I just imagine that a lot of the credibility that he lent to ECW might have been for nothing. If he wasn't there, ECW might not have even existed, or at least it wouldn't have existed the way it was. Do you agree, Jaden?
He definitely added a lot of credibility to ECW.
Hey, real quick, your mic sounds really weird.
Can you hear me now?
It's like a tin can.
Hold on.
No.
All right, I'm gonna catch out and go back in then.
Sounds good. I'll ask you the same question, DK. Like, do you think do you think the ECW would have thrived the way it did without a Terry Funk?
Yes and no, differently. Terry Funk gave it a credibility that you just don't have. And, by the end, you had a lot, Dusty Rhodes made an appearance, other legends made an appearance. But I think some of that is because of Terry Funk and Terry Funk winning the ECW World Championship, which may have been his last solo World Championship. I'm not 100% sure since he wrestled everywhere on the bloody planet.
Actually, it wasn't, because after that, he would end up becoming a three-time hardcore WCW World Champion. He would also hold the Juggalo Wrestling Championship, and even held the 3PW heavyweight title. But I want to throw that question back to Jaden, because I know, being in South Jersey, so close to Philadelphia, that's kind of the breeding ground of where Extreme Championship Wrestling kind of blossomed. And I want to get Jaden's opinion. Like, does ECW exist, or does it at least thrive the way it did without a Terry Funk?
I don't think so, because again, Shane Douglas wouldn't have met as much because he was feuding with Shane Douglas. Sabu wouldn't have met as much because he was feuding with Sabu. That Eastern Championship that he feuded over with those two really put ECW on the map. And while it wasn't the first triangle match, it was a very, very big deal for ECW to get that triangle match, and it made a big difference in their perception as a major company instead of just another small indie. And the whole area loved Terry Funk. Dennis Carluzzo events, I've seen him against Chris Benoit. I've seen him against Bob Backlund. That was a weird match. Really good, though. Yeah, look it up. I think it is on YouTube. I saw him against Jerry the King Lawler. I saw him against Hot Stuff and Gilbert numerous times. And they just loved the Funker. He was middle-aged and crazy, and everybody in Philadelphia, New Jersey, that whole area was just enamored with Terry Funk at the time. And he was as big a draw, I think, in the area for Philly and South Jersey area than I think he was anywhere in the world.
And, he was they talk about him starting Extreme, and I don't know where to go with that. But, even before the death matches in Japan and all the crazy stipulations, he was just an extreme dude in wrestling. He was the one that was he the one that started in ECW, them fans throwing chairs in the ring?
Yeah.
Was him?
Yeah.
It was him and Cactus Jack against, I believe it was Public Enemy, right?
I believe you're correct, yeah.
I just know it took off after that. But, yeah, even in the early days of wrestling, I told the story, with his dad, we already got one crazy son. In his early matches, he was known to bend the rules a lot. And Terry Gordy once said this, but whenever I hear the phrase, I always think of Terry Funk. Terry Gordy once said, he goes, I may not be the best wrestler in the world. He goes, but I can swing a chair better than any of them. And that's kind of the way Terry Funk throughout a lot of his career was portrayed. He may not be the best wrestler, although he was a very good wrestler. Go watch his matches when he was champion. Google it. And or Google some of his Japan stuff. I mean, he was a very good wrestler, but man, he could swing a chair better than any of them.
Our pal Hisa reminds us that the Funks, all inclusive, including Senior, booked for All Japan. So without them, there would have been no All Japan Pro Wrestling. That I did not know. My experience with Terry Funk, obviously I was too young to see his run as world's heavyweight champion. By the time I was old enough to start watching wrestling, the Grand Olympic Auditorium was kind of done. So we would only get the occasional AWA show out here, but more predominantly we would have, the WWF at the time. So I never really got to experience Terry Funk the way that a lot of other people did. I did see him in the WWE. I remember him with the branding iron and Jimmy Jack Funk and all of that stuff. It was very crazy and chaotic. I didn't really understand as a kid, but the first time I really understood who Terry Funk was after that match with I don't remember who Ric Flair was wrestling. I think it was Ricky Steamboat, and Terry Funk was one of the judges, and he was in the tuxedo, and he definitely looked out of place in a tuxedo.
Yeah, it was when Flair regained the title from Steamboat.
Yeah, and then when he would get into the ring to congratulate Rick, and I remember, I didn't really know who Terry Funk was, but I think on the show they had probably mentioned that he was a former NWA World Heavyweight Champion, and he was like, "Well, Rick, how about my shot, Rick? I want a shot at that belt." And Rick was like, "You're too old. You're washed up. You're not a wrestler anymore. You're an actor." And then Terry Funk proceeded to beat the ever living shit out of Ric Flair after a long match with Ricky Steamboat, and it was one of like in the Kaylee household, in the Jake Howe household. I remember being a very young, not that young, but a young boy, and my mom absolutely hated Ric Flair. The only person she hated more than Ric Flair,
Terry Funk.
Terry Funk. So, and that was such an amazing scene that, like, because at that point, I don't think I ever saw a wrestler go through a table. I don't think I ever saw anyone get brutalized the way that Ric Flair did, and there wasn't a horseman there to back him up. I think Sting eventually came out and made the save, but it was
that was a long beatdown.
Yeah, it was almost uncomfortable, right? Like, I remember watching it and thinking, like, man, does nobody not give a damn about this guy? And I was a kid, and I'm like, usually if someone attacks the other person, you'll see one of the other good guys run out or something happens, and Funk just beat the tar out of Flair.
Yeah, this was kind of the extreme that we talked about. He was doing things that you just couldn't imagine. And, wow.
Another story I heard today, and this is secondhand hearing, so I don't know if it's true or not. I think I read it on Twitter, but now I don't remember where I heard it from. And Terry Funk went out there during one of the ECW pay-per-views, and he said he was going to go out there and do a moonsault. And the Sandman pulled him aside and said, "Terry, you don't have to do that, man. You don't have to do that." And Terry was kind of hurt and said, "Well, you don't think I can?" And then he went out and did it, because that was the kind of person Terry Funk was. And it's amazing to me to think about, again, if there was no Terry Funk, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think the ECW exists the way that it does, which means that Tommy Dreamer, Sandman, Taz, Sabu, the Dudleys, none of these guys become relevant. And what a world how different would the world of wrestling look if those guys weren't a thing?
Some people think it'd be much better, but
I mean, maybe, but like, could you attribute Terry Funk for making Eastern Championship Wrestling relevant, so that when Shane Douglas won the title and threw it down, that's all Terry Funk's fault?
Well, he actually quit the promotion that night, so maybe he thought so.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah, and it was supposed to be Terry Funk and Mick Foley versus Public Enemy for the tag titles, and he was upset about what he found out. They told him apparently ahead of time as a respect for him, and he left and did not want anything to do with, and that's where Mikey Whipwreck was born. Well, he was born a little bit before by beating Pitbull Gary Wolf, but him and Cactus Jack as the odd couple tag team, the unlikely tag team champions, was born in that angle because Terry Funk quit.
I never had heard that before. I guess. So obviously I wasn't following ECW back then either, but I had always kind of assumed that he just rolled with the punches because he was still a part of ECW later. But wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he actually he was gone for a little while. I think he even started working for Carluzzo at the time. I'm not sure now, but because he started in this area by Dennis Carluzzo, and I mean, obviously, he probably wrestled here for Jim Crockett Promotions or anybody else who was running the area at the time. But like modern wrestling wise, Carluzzo was the guy who was booking Terry Funk everywhere, and was very enjoyable as a fan of the area. But he still had respect to the NWA name and the NWA title and to Dennis. He's one of the few people that didn't screw Dennis over during the ECW versus NWA feud.
Well, I just pulled up Terry Funk's matches that you could get at Cage Match. Now, these obviously aren't 100% accurate, but it's a good resource to kind of give you an idea. And he was competing in ECW and FMW and in Puerto Rico with Carlos Colon's promotion, and also working with some of the other NWA promoters at the time, like NWA Grand Slam. He was working in '92. He was working with Carluzzo with WWA, and he spent like '93 pretty much wrestling everywhere. Some of the NWA promotions, like NWA in Pennsylvania, working ECW, again working in Germany, working Smoky Mountain, and then by '94 he was again a regular in ECW, a regular in USWA, really working just everywhere. And like you had mentioned him wrestling Chris Benoit, that was an NWA New Jersey event, and there's, man, you just keep looking at his matches, and he was everywhere. And when he wasn't wrestling in FMW or ECW, he was getting matches in WCW as part of the Stud Stable, teaming with Bunkhouse Buck. And he was, it's wild to me because I'm like, okay, so he came into WCW like in May, and by June he was wrestling matches in ECW. By July he was back in Smoky Mountain, and then still wrestling matches for ECW and still wrestling matches for WCW. So like, I guess he wasn't really an exclusive wrestler for any of those promotions, apparently.
I think he was the WCW thing came as part of a deal with ECW because there was some kind of lawsuit going on. I think that was part of how that happened. But I remember was it him versus Tully Blanchard at a WCW event? He went to try to pile drive off the top rope, and Tully Blanchard chickened out. But yeah, he was everywhere, and people really, they credit ECW to the resurgence of the Funker, but in reality, his resurgence really came in to be in the USWA. He reignited his feud with Lawler in the USWA over the unified title, and that really was a hot feud going at that time. It kind of sparked the territory a little bit too.
And going back to '94, I mean, the Armstrongs and the Funk Brothers had several matches in the USWA. It's interesting because we how do I say this politically? If a tree does, let me say this the right way. As a fan of wrestling, I don't typically go and look to see what happened in USWA in 1994 without a reason. But then when you go and look and you see like, oh, well, the Funker was having Texas death matches in Smoky Mountain Wrestling back in '94, and there's a lot of cool stuff that was happening there. And the best of Memphis 10-man survival. Jerry Lawler defeats Austin Idol, Brian Christopher, Doug Gilbert, Eddie Gilbert, Jimmy Valiant, Coco Beware, Moondog Spot, Terry Funk, and Tommy Rich. Just, I don't know, it's just wild.
Did you know he held the WCW US Championship?
I saw that, but I don't I don't see when and where.
It wasn't. It's one of those things. He won it clean. He lost it clean the next night, and WCW TV ignored it.
Oh,
But yeah, he in September of 2000, he beat Lance Storm for the title in Amarillo, and then lost it the next night in Lubbock, which of course were the two big cities of his family's old territory. So
nice way to pop the crowd, I guess.
Yeah. Terry breathing, I think, popped the crowd. And he did start one tradition I'm not necessarily thrilled about.
The retirement match.
The retirement match. He had more retirement matches than any other person on the face of the planet. And I'm pretty sure that no one's broken that record yet.
Even Ric Flair.
What?
Even Ric Flair.
Even Ric Flair. Flair's probably getting close, but you know,
remember
Terry started retiring in the 70s, just so you know.
Remember that documentary, the Beyond the Mat, that that was kind of following Terry Funk's retirement, right? And Dennis Stamp was there, and I'm not booked, Terry. And he's on the trampoline with the weights. Do you guys remember that or no?
I have a vague memory.
I remember thinking that was just the most hilarious thing that I ever saw, that this grown man had some, cardio type dumbbells bouncing on a trampoline, getting his exercise in. I mean, looking back now, like as an older man myself, I'm like, hey, that's actually a pretty smart way to do it. Low impact on the knees. But as a young man, I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, try what happens when you drop the weights.
no shit.
Yeah, don't drop them and right in front of you. I promise you that much.
So, do you guys have any more Terry Funk stories you want to share?
Well, look, if you want us to share Terry Funk stories, we'll be here till next week.
Well, we do have to talk about the 75th anniversary pay-per-view, but
okay, let me just share some Terry Funk stories. Actually,
I'll be completely honest. Your boy Jay has to get up at 4:00 in the morning to make his flight to St. Louis, Missouri. I have been checking emails. The last time I was supposed to go to an NWA show, my flight got canceled while we were doing a podcast. So far we look good. I'm checked in for my flight, but I am going to have an early morning. So I'm hoping that we don't last all night tonight. But I would love to hear a few more Terry Funk stories before we cover the pay-per-view.
You got any DK before I go?
I'll let you do the first one.
All right. If you want to go back to see two things you don't believe, go back and look at the Saturday night's main event match with Terry Funk with Jimmy Hart in his corner going after the WWF Championship against a blue trunk-clad Hulk Hogan with the Junkyard Dog in his corner. It is both premium Terry Funk and probably some of the best Hulk Hogan not in Japan you've ever seen.
Okay. I'm writing that
very,
down.
very entertaining match. I think it was actually won by the Lariat, too.
The Axe Bomber.
Yeah, I think that's what he called the Lariat, his version of the he slightly bent the elbow and called it that. It was a clothesline. But it was such a entertaining, very enjoyable match for Saturday night's main event. And soon after that, poor Terry Funk's horse got very sick. In case you're wondering, though, he's not at all related to either Jimmy Jack or Flash Funk.
The Flash one I was always curious about, but I knew Jimmy Jack was not. Who was Jimmy Jack Funk? Was that Art Barr?
Jesse Barr.
Jesse Barr, his brother.
Yes. A very talented, ironically, partially trained by Dory Funk Jr. and was Dory Funk's protege in Florida.
Yeah. So that in Windsor.
Yeah. He of course had had a good run in Florida before they put that mask on him and renamed him Jimmy Jack. And if anybody wants to know when the world started losing its mind in wrestling, Jimmy Jack Funk is a good date to start.
He milked that, though. I mean, he had a great run in Texas with that, great run in Portland with that, great run in Tennessee with that. He milked the hell out of that gimmick.
And considering he was part of, wrestling royalty in the Pacific Northwest, that tells you something.
But yeah, he had way more success out of the WWE with that gimmick than he did with it.
Real quick, I do want to point this out, that Hulk Hogan and Terry Funk, I mean, it wasn't like a full-blown feud, but they had a series of matches in 85 and 86. Actually, their first time they faced each other was in 1982 for Wrestling in Sun City in South Africa, which Sun City's not a very nice place. And then on house shows, Hogan versus Funk happened quite a bit in 85. And then the aforementioned Saturday night's main event. I don't see a one-on-one match between Hogan and Funk at Saturday night's main event, but I see a Saturday night's main event where Hogan and Junkyard Dog teamed up against Haas Funk and Terry Funk. Who was Haas Funk? That was
Dory. They didn't like the name Dory, so they gave the name Haas from Bonanza, and that was the rematch. That was the built up from, I believe, that first match was Saturday night's main event between Hogan and Terry Funk. Again, if you can find it, it's probably on YouTube, maybe if not on the network. It was very, very enjoyable match. It was one of Hogan's best matches before he started getting formulaic and hitting the very stereotypical Hogan stuff. It was a very good match. And I just realized Hogan really did dominate a lot of NWA champions, didn't he? He wrestled against a lot of NWA stars. And that time when he was against Funk, that was when Hogan was rotating through a lot of different talent. He was also defending against Don Morocco and against Greg the Hammer Valentine. And there was a lot of wrestlers out there at the time that he was defending against. But Terry Funk was a prolific challenger. And Hulk Hogan has gone on the record to say he was a big Terry Funk fan.
Flair, too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think anybody that worked with him was a fan. Because
Hogan was a fan growing up. Terry Funk fan.
How could you not be?
True.
We were talking about
hated him.
We were talking about gimmicks earlier, and Terry Funk, or characters even. And Terry Funk once had one of the best lines ever. He was talking about which is going to be my story here. He was talking about the empty arena match he had with Jerry Lawler, which I believe was the first of its kind. And it was a concept that he had actually come up with. And he noted, he goes, "Nobody told me what to say. Nobody told me what to do. I was my own creator." And yes, I looked that quote up because I remember him saying something along those lines. And it's just amazing to think that wasn't unusual necessarily in that day. That was the standard. At most, you were given some bullet points. Hey, hit this. Or if you talked about things a little bit, you might throw some ideas around or whatever. Michael Hayes gave Kevin Von Erich the line of, this isn't a feud between Georgia and Texas. So, it's between decency and filth, which really popped the crowd. And so Kevin delivered it perfectly, which he wasn't a great orator, so that's kind of amazing. But he delivered it perfectly. And but Michael Hayes is the one that came up with it. But yeah, Terry Funk, he wasn't a gimmick. He wasn't a character. We talked about this at the beginning. He was Terry Funk. And when he went out there and he said things, and when he went out there and he did things, that was Terry Funk. Not the promoter, not not a writer somewhere back behind that never watched wrestling as a kid. Not a booker. You said, "Hey Terry, this is kind of what we want," and you walked away. Or this is what the end's going to be, and you walked away. Terry Funk did everything else. And that empty arena match, that was with Jerry Lawler. That was a culmination of a feud that was so violent, so bad. They had to have this no DQ match, and they couldn't risk having fans because we didn't know what was going to happen.
Didn't Lance Russell call that match?
I believe so.
Most likely, if he did, the only person probably would have been Lance Russell.
Yeah, and it's just one of those, what do you, this is when they talk about Terry Funk being extreme before it was cool, or extreme before it was popular, or extreme before, what I will say, before it was stupid. I was watching NXT the other night, watch one of the bozos hit two back-to-back spike DDTs, and the guy kicked out of it. And, I don't think either one of them weighed 160 pounds if you really put them on a scale. And it was just like, nah, man, that's not extreme. That's not athletic. There's so much more. That's dancing. I mean, dancing can be athletic. I can barely do it. But
you should see me cut a rug.
I wish we can go back to times when we had the video where DK was dancing in the background. Post-production, can you put that in real quick? Make sure that ends up on.
We need to start marking these things. We need to start marking these things so we can pull them up later.
Yeah. So, but anyway,
put it on TikTok. Put it on the shorts or reels.
So I'll ask you.
Play the Benny Hill music in the background. What was Terry Funk's finishing maneuvers, DK? It too.
Well, I know he used a pile driver.
Yep.
You said something about a lariat.
He didn't use the lariat. And I was Hogan using the lariat.
Oh,
in the match.
Yeah.
It was a submission hold.
Everybody used a figure four. Did he use a figure four too?
No, it was a submission hold that he won more with a pinfall with for some reason.
I don't remember. Was it
an easy spinning toe hold?
Spinning toe hold, yeah.
Because that was like a Funk family move.
That was a Funk thing, yes.
Yeah, and he won the spinning toe hold often by pinning somebody with it.
Who was that?
Never understood that, but I've seen it more than once.
In the match with Briscoe where he won the title, that was part of the thing. He would try to go for a spinning toe hold, and Briscoe would try to go for his figure four. And Terry actually won it when Briscoe went for the figure four and had a slight delay, according to Gordon Soley, and Funk rolled him up and pinned him. And he lost the title to Harley Race on the third and final fall in a submission. Harley had done an Indian Deathlock, by the way, real submission, and Terry. This back before tapping existed, and so, but yeah, the referee finally said Terry had submitted, and boy, those are. I don't care what anyone says. Those were the days, man. They came out not injured. It might be sore, but they came out uninjured, and everybody left the arena, the gymnasium, the whatever they were in, and they believed. I don't know what normally happens, but let me tell you, I believe that what I just saw. And Terry Funk was the epitome of the old Johnny Valentine line. I can't make you believe wrestling's real, but I can make you believe I am. And that's what I've been trying to say all night, I guess. Terry Funk was real.
It's still real to me, damn it. Sorry.
Sadly, I regret that I didn't have enough time to get a shirt made in memorial of Terry Funk that says Tyrus sucks eggs, because they're going to be wrestling a bull rope match on Sunday, and bull rope matches typically the wrestlers kind of come as you are. And, how often did we see, Dusty Rhodes come out to the ring in street clothes and Terry Funk come out to the ring in street clothes when they were doing like a hardcore match or something like a bull rope match or a come as you are match, whatever it is.
Texas Death Match.
What's that?
Texas Death Match.
Yeah, Texas Death Match. So
they typically did Texas. Their gimmick extreme match was either a bull rope or Texas Death. And different than the way they do them today.
Ironically enough, Tyrus kind of claims that Dusty Rhodes was his mentor. Dusty Rhodes was kind of the guy that put him in the position that he was with the WWE and all that. And I think it'd be fitting if someone had a shirt, hey, EC3, are you listening? That said, Tyrus sucks eggs. I don't know. Thank you for tuning in to the Alliance Blog Podcast, a presentation of Alliance-Wrestling.com, the premier source for news and information for the National Wrestling Alliance. Would you consider subscribing so you never miss a new episode? You can follow us on all social media at the Alliance Blog, and we stream live on Twitch, Kick, and YouTube every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 5 p.m., 6 p.m., and 8 p.m. Eastern at the Alliance Blog. Until then, we are the Alliance.